What's up, Youth United? Super excited to be here again this week. Sadly, nobody else is here, but we're still trying to figure out how to do this. And even though we're just online right now, I think that this is just a great opportunity for us to continue on with as much normal YU as we can. But this week we're starting something different. For the last few weeks, we've been talking about faith over fear. Now, while that's not going away, we're going to be moving on to a new series called The U Effect. And this U Effect is all about the word influence. And where do you have influence in your life? Maybe some of you would say you have no influence. Maybe some of you would say, I have a lot of influence. But we want to talk about the influence that you personally have. But in order to get to that, I want to start out by telling a story about somebody, or actually two people in this situation, that had more influence than I gave them credit. And that ultimately, I may not treat the situation the best way. I'll let you decide that. So I'm going to talk about two people that a lot of you probably know. If you don't know them, it doesn't really matter. But these two people are, one, a guy named Will Grisham, and two, a guy named Joseph Petrosini. So the first time that I ever actually interacted with these two people together was when what is now called our student staff, which is our student leadership. When I was in high school, it was called 2.0. And we used to do this thing called 2.0 boot camp. And so at boot camp, it was this crazy thing where we had to go and basically try to survive on our own without the help of any adults, except for the guy who was there at the time, who was leading YU at that time. He was there, but he didn't really help us. He was just there in case we really needed something. Other than that, we had to figure it out. We were camping out in Springfield, Nebraska. It was actually a really fun time, but we actually needed some firewood. And if Joseph or Will are listening to this, they know exactly where this story is going, and maybe some of you do too, because this is one of my favorite stories to tell about myself and especially Will. But we were chopping through this tree. We had to have a tree that was laying on the ground, so there's a tree laying on the ground, and we're like, all right, I have an axe. I'm the only person allowed to use the axe because I was a senior in high school. They didn't trust anybody else with the axe, so they said, Coleman, you're the only person allowed to use it. So I'm like, all right. So I found a tree, but I did not find like a tree that was like this thick. This tree was like, thick. It was a big old tree. And so we're like, it's on the ground, let's cut through it. And we start cutting through it. Half an hour passes. And it's just like, all right, let's keep going. And I'm chopping, and I'm chopping, and I'm chopping. And we're rolling the log over and chopping and chopping. And this thing is not coming out. It was about an hour and a half later that we are sitting here still chopping through this tree. And it doesn't look like we're going anywhere anytime soon. Now, there were about 10 of us on this trip, maybe a few less. And there were two sides. There was a side that was my side that was like, we're going to get through this log. And that consisted of me, a girl named Nicole, and Joseph. And on the other side, there was everybody else who was like, Coleman, we need to stop chopping through this log. And they were led by Will Grisham. And so on this trip, basically what ended up happening is they were getting mad, and Will ends up coming up to me while I'm chopping. He says, Coleman, we are done with this. We're going to find a different way. I'm putting my foot down. And he physically puts his foot down on the log about that close to where I'm chopping. And I look at him, and I'm like, all right, this kid is influencing a whole lot of people, but he's a sophomore in high school. Like, I'm the senior. I have the influence here. So you're going to back off. And he's like, no, Coleman, I'm not going to back off. I'm like, you better move your foot, Will. You better move it. And I'm not kidding you. It is this close to where I'm chopping. I'm like, I'm going to chop. And he's like, I bet you won't. You know what I did? Bam! As hard as I could, just inches away from his foot. And the shock that was on his face, he was just sitting there like this. He was like, and he turned around and he walked away. And he actually didn't come back and complain after that. We ended up getting through the log, and we had some firewood because of it. But from that moment on, Will and I actually became really good friends. We kind of started out as butting heads because of who we were as people, but we actually ended up becoming really good friends. And you might be thinking, well, you also were talking about Joseph. Joseph was also on this trip. And the entire time this was happening, this took about 2.5 hours to get through this log. Joseph was the most happy guy in the world. Joseph was sitting there like, guys, I think we can get through it. And I think we work together as a team, we can do this. And he was a freshman. This was like his first time ever doing anything with Youth United. He was like, I think we can go, and he was just super happy about everything. And while Will and I are yelling at each other, getting mad, he was super happy and super supportive. And in that moment, I saw two different kinds of influence that are actually pretty similar. But I saw Joseph, who's going to be extremely positive about, regardless of what the situation was, he was going to be super positive and going to encourage people to go through it. And I saw Will, who saw a situation that maybe could be better and maybe I could have been doing better in, and was going to challenge me because of that, because of the way he thought. And even though I was going against him, he still wanted to try to influence me to do something else because he thought he had a better idea. And which, honestly, he probably did have a better idea ultimately. I just wasn't willing to listen to him. So I want you to think about for a second, who is somebody, think of one person in your life that has influence. Doesn't matter who they are. They could be a friend, they could be a girlfriend, they could be a boyfriend, they could be a parent, they could be your small group leader, whoever it is. Think about somebody in your life who has influence. Now I want you to think about some of those qualities that they have. Like maybe they're like Joseph, they're super positive, or maybe they're like Will, who he has a lot of words to say, but he says them in a way that you really just want to listen to him. Maybe you think that I have a lot of influence just because I'm the person who's on the video right now, and I'm the person that's giving this message, so I have influence because of that. Now, regardless of who it is, I want you to just think about those qualities. Maybe it's because they're fun. The person's just fun to be around, and so you think, I just want to be around them. Everybody wants to be around them because they're fun people. Maybe they're just super nice. I would put Joseph in that category. There's somebody that's just like, no matter who you are, no matter who they're talking to, it's like they're always being nice to you. Like I could be a jerk to this person, and regardless, they're still going to be nice back to me. Or maybe they work so hard that like I think of people who are on like professional sports teams. You think of like LeBron James. He works so hard that the rest of the team wants to work hard because of how hard he works. Maybe they're like that. Or maybe they're the complete opposite. It's possible to have influence and have negative influence. Maybe they're so mean that everyone acknowledges that they are mean. Maybe it's that they are always so ticked off. They're so ticked off about things that are going on that their anger actually influences other people to have more anger in a situation. Maybe that they are so loud that literally you have to talk over them and start yelling because they are so loud, and because of them, the entire room gets louder too. Whether it's good or bad influence, they still have some sort of influence. But we need to think about it for a second. Do you think that they realize that they have influence? Do you think they realize that they have the ability to change a room just by walking into it? Because I think so much of the time we go on thinking that we don't have influence anywhere, when actually the truth is we do. That's what's going to make this series so tricky, but also so interesting, is that over the next few weeks we're going to be talking about how you are actually affecting people without realizing that you're affecting people. There are very few people in the world who would say, yep, I have influence. Who just have the confidence to say, when I walk into the room, stuff changes. When I walk into the room, I'm the person that's leading. There are not many people who are like that. But regardless of who you are, you have influence in some way over some sort of people. And so we want to discover where your influence lies. But in order to do this, we also have to apply this to the Bible. Or, well, in better case, the Bible applies to this. And so we're going to talk about a story here, and I'm not going to read it straight out of John 6. It's 14 verses long. I don't want to read that whole thing to you. So I'm just going to tell you what happened. If you are interested in reading, it's in John 6, verse 10. It starts in verse 1. It goes through verse 14. And so this is actually when Jesus feeds 10,000 people. So what this looks like is they had just gotten done traveling across the sea. It's almost like in between two of the stories we talked about Jesus walking on water and there's a storm. It's in the middle there somewhere. And so they're traveling and they get to this place and there are thousands of people around them who came to see Jesus. Now I think for many of us who are Christ followers, we would say Jesus is the ultimate influencer. Like, that's so true. I mean, Jesus has the more influence than anybody ever has ever. You think of people who we literally call influencers on social media because of the stuff that they do. We call them literally influencers. They don't compare to any of the influence that Jesus had because of how great at influencing people he was. Jesus was so good at it that thousands of people from all over, which you're thinking, well, like thousands of people go to concerts or go to sports events or go to political rallies or something. Yeah, but you think about the number of people that were around and the ability to travel to go and see Jesus. The fact that there were over 10,000 people with Jesus at this time is absolutely insane. Because when you look at it, Jesus was nobody. Jesus was just a carpenter's son. All they knew was Jesus was doing great miracles, but a lot of them had no proof. And so they wanted to come and see. And so they were, when they say he fed 10,000, that's just 10,000 men, because back then they didn't include women and children. And so there were 10,000 men. So there are over 10,000 people here. And they're all just sitting on a hill. And they're like, all right, we need to eat. So let's go get some food. We need to get some food for everybody. And he looks at John and he says, well, we need food for everybody. John goes, dude, in order to pay for food for everybody, that's going to cost us like half a year's earnings. I think it's actually what he directly says. It's going to take a half a year's earnings. Now, could you imagine like if we had at YU, we had 10,000 people show up. And I was like, all right, guys, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go down to Good Life. Everyone's getting pizza on me. You know how much that would cost? I don't make that much money. There's no way I could afford to buy 10,000 people some Good Life pizza, even if it was on Monday for half-price pizza. No way I could afford that. And Jesus was no different. They didn't have a lot of money either. And so they're like, I don't know how we're going to feed everybody. They kind of get a little nervous, like people are getting hungry. You know what happens when people get hungry? They get a little bit angry. What happens to large angry crowds? They become a little bit worse than just your normal crowd. And so they're actually getting a little bit nervous, and they're like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And Jesus is like, come on, man. You've already seen me perform miracles. You don't think I'm going to do it again? And they're trying to figure out what they can do, and they're like, maybe we can go and do this, we can go and do that, we can go do this, trying to come up with ideas, and maybe we just send the people away to go get food and they'll come back. But Jesus knows that if they send everybody away, most of the people won't ever come back. So actually what he ends up doing is he sees a boy. And this boy has some fish, and all they had was a little bit of bread. The disciples already had some bread, and this boy had some fish. And basically what he says is put them in the baskets. And this boy takes his fish and he says, okay. He gives it to Jesus. And they put it in the baskets. And I believe they had like 6 loaves of bread and just a very small amount of fish. And what ends up happening is they actually end up feeding everybody. Like all 10,000 people just with that amount. Now maybe you're thinking, well, maybe they just had a little piece. No, nobody went hungry. They all had a full meal. And then they even had leftovers for later. And the fact that they had so little and they were able to feed everybody was a miracle that Jesus performed in front of thousands of people. And thousands of people believed that he was the Son of God because of this. Now I want you to be thinking about, okay, who has the influence in this story? No doubt Jesus has influence. We talked about this earlier. Jesus has a ton of influence in our lives. Like no matter who you are, Jesus has the ability to influence you. He's still influencing us over 2,000 years later. That's absolutely insane that his influence goes that long. But I think there's a couple other people here that have influence that we forget about. One of the influential people is the disciples. There's 12 of them. They're all trying to figure out what are we going to do for food. They're trying to influence each other to figure out what do we actually have to do. Like what are the ways we can do this? They're trying to think of ways we can go. And they're like, we're trying to use our influence to make a decision for thousands of people. So we have Jesus, we have the disciples. There's the crowd, the thousands of people. If you just group them all into one thing, as a crowd, they have influence. They were all hungry, so they knew they needed to eat. Their influenced the needing to have a decision what we're going to have for food. But there's one person that I think in this story is always overlooked as to what their influence was. I think this is the one that can be most applicable to us today. I think about the boy. You think about this kid who really, especially back then, kids had zero influence. Nowadays, you can be a kid and have a YouTube channel and have influence over people. But back then, a boy was just nothing. Like, you're just learning how to be an adult. You mean nothing. You're just a kid. You don't give to society. You just take, and one day you'll give back when you're older. And this kid is near Jesus, and Jesus says, hey, let me have your fish. And this kid is sitting there just with a very small amount of fish. He's thinking, maybe this can feed me. Like, if I give this to him, I'm probably not going to eat because he's going to try to give this to everybody else. And I'm not very high up on the quote-unquote food chain. All the men come before me, then all the women, and then it's me. I'm probably not going to get my fish back if I give it to him. And on top of that, he's probably not thinking about using his fish because he has so little. He's thinking, there's no way I can feed 10,000 people, so I'm not even going to talk about the amount of fish that I have. And so what he ends up doing is going to Jesus with what he has, and he gives it to Jesus. Now, this is so applicable to us because we have to go to Jesus with the gifts that we already have. I think it's so easy to look at somebody else's influence. I do it all the time. I go and I watch sermons like the one I'm giving right now. I go and watch people who have been doing it longer than I have, who are much better at doing it than I am, and I go and watch them and I think, wow, I want to be like that person. And so then I end up trying to write something that is like in the mindset of what would that person say, when really what I have to do is I have to write for what would I say because I have gifts that God has given me. You have gifts that God has given you. And when we look at other people's gifts and say, I want to be more like that, then we're trying to go to Jesus with gifts that we don't even have. Could you imagine that kid went with his fish and didn't even have fish? There'd be no point in the story if he didn't have any fish. So we have to go to Jesus with the gifts that we already have. And when we go to Jesus with those gifts, he will use them to influence people. The same way he used what the small amount of this fish that this kid had to feed the thousands of people. You have more of an effect on people than you realize. I think a lot of us are probably sitting here like, I don't even know why you're giving this talk right now. Why are we talking about influence? We can't influence anybody. We're stuck in our houses. We can't influence anybody from home. How do we do this? But guys, right now is the perfect time for you to start thinking about your influence. Because the people you are going to influence the most are the people who are around you the most. And right now, you are probably around the same people every single day. All of us have families of some sort. You're living somewhere with your family right now. You have parents, whether it's mom and dad or just mom or just dad. You have somebody who's helping raise you. Maybe you have siblings, older or younger, it doesn't really matter, but they are living with you right now. Even if they're in college, they're probably back at home living with you because all colleges are shut down too. And we are around the same people every single day. It's driving me crazy. I love being around new people. I haven't met a new person in like a month and a half. It's driving me crazy. It might be driving you crazy too. But we have the opportunity to influence the people that we love the most. Maybe it's a younger sibling. I think it's an easy one for us to think about influencing. It's so easy for us to just be so short with our younger siblings. I'm struggling with this with my fiance. She has a 7-year-old brother, and I love him to death. His name's Jordan. I love Jordan. But Jordan wants to play Fortnite every single day. And he texts me every time I'm playing video games, hey, let's play some Fortnite. Hey, let's play some Fortnite. Hey, let's play some Fortnite. And I don't always want to play Fortnite. And sometimes I can be a little bit short with him because of how much Fortnite the kid wants to play. But I went over yesterday, I brought my PlayStation over, I did some homework, and I sat down, I played a couple hours of Fortnite with him. And the kid loved it. He loved it. It meant so much to him that I just sat down and played Fortnite with him for a couple hours. That is just leaving influence on him. He's 7 years old. I'm 22. He looks up to me like I'm his dad almost. Like he loves me so much and he wants to be like me. He sees I'm a nice guy, and so he just wants to hang out with me. And I'm like, sometimes I'm just like, no, I don't want to hang out with you, but I have to put what I want aside at times in order to influence him. But we also have parents. All of us are obviously younger than our parents. And so most people think our parents have influence on us. It's hard for us to have influence on our parents. Yes, it is harder to have influence on your parents than your younger siblings. But guys, right now, we have the opportunity to influence our parents in a way that is absolutely incredible. We have the opportunity to serve them. Like, could you imagine if you just went and you did the dishes without even them asking? After dinner, they probably made dinner for you. After they made dinner, could you imagine if you just went over there and did the dishes for them? They would love that, and that would leave positive influence on your parents. And because you're doing that, you have the opportunity then to invest into their lives the same way they've invested into yours, and over time, that's going to grow into a mutual respect between you two. And those are just your family. That's just the people who are closest to you. And then on top of that, if we're working on influence at home, we'll have the opportunity to affect all the people that we are around in the future. All of our friends, when we go back to school, we will have a knowledge of how to influence them better and how to influence them closer to Jesus. So, when you're thinking about this, I want you to think about 3 steps. When it comes to leaving influence, I want you to think about these 3 steps. One is identify the who. Identify the immediate person in front of you that needs some encouragement, that needs just a little bit of love, that just needs a little something extra from somebody right now. Maybe for you right now it is your sibling, maybe it's your parents, maybe it's your friend. Identify who needs a little bit of something extra from you, and identify what exactly it is that they need. Sometimes they just need, hey, it's going to be okay. Sometimes they need, I'm sorry, that sucks. Sometimes they need a hug. Sometimes they need you to play Fortnite with them. Identify what they need. And then once you identify what they need, identify what you can do about it. The biggest step in influence is a physical step. We have to take a step into our influence. So if we are taking a step into it, we have to actually do something about it. And so once you identify who, you identify what, I want you then to take a step and go and do the thing that you have already identified. Be like the little boy from the story. Just go and as Nike would say, just do it. Just go and let's just see some action happen, and go and use the influence that you have, use the influence that Jesus has given you to positively affect somebody today. Now, over the next couple weeks, we're going to be talking about, this is a 3-week series. We're going to be talking about the influence that you have, the way you can use it positively, and then how we can actually use it in our day-to-day lives. So guys, I'm super excited for this series going forward. Right after this video is done, we are going to be going into our small groups. If you are brand new to Youth United, you've never been, there's a link in the description below. Hit that link. You will go to a Zoom call led by Seth Monteith, and he will guide you to where you need to go next. But guys, I'm just super excited about this series. Let's go and talk about our influence in our small groups. And I'm going to pray for us, and we'll get ready for this, all right? Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for our students. I thank you for the influence that each and every one of them have. I thank you that they are willing to take a physical step into this influence, that they are going to, that they are just going to want to live this out. That God, they have influence in their lives regardless of if they realize it or not. And I pray over this series that they would realize the impact that they are leaving on people. That the impact they have and the impact and opportunity they have to lead people to you. Thank you for just giving us this opportunity to come together, and I pray our small groups go great. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. We'll see you guys next week.